Good evening, everyone. Thanks for watching Kentucky Sports Television. I'm Clayton Abernathy in for TJ Beisner tonight. It's an all-football show for us here with the Cats on a bye week. We're going to look back at the first half of the season. Cats are off to a 5-1 start for just the fifth time in the last 40 years. The wins, though, haven't been pretty. Their average margin of victory just 6.1 points per game. So despite the record of 5-1, fans have been frustrated with the team so far, and Lachlan McClain joins me tonight. Lachlan, do you think that fans have a right to be frustrated with this start?
Well, it's honestly interesting to me to hear you say they are frustrated, because the ones that talk to my radio show are euphoric. I'm the one who's trying to make them frustrated, saying your team is not playing very well, and this record is schedule-based and not performance-based. And I guess when you present them with that, they go, hey, 5-1 is 5-1. So it's the weirdest 5-1 team that I've ever seen, because they really haven't played well. They haven't dominated mediocre competition. They've let teams hang around. And yet you could argue that traditionally Kentucky doesn't just let mediocre teams hang around. They lose to mediocre teams. So this is a better team than perhaps UK teams in the past. But I understand the frustration of the fans who think at some point the subpar play, the mistakes are going to catch up with them in the latter half of the season.
I think people just need to realize that this team is not built to blow people out.
No, they're not.
But I will say with Eastern Kentucky and Eastern Michigan, you should win by more than 11 points and 4 points respectively.
I mean, Eastern Kentucky was a 1-point game with 11 minutes left. It's hard to really believe in a team, UK, that's going to be in that position. But in the end, it's a scoreboard-based business, and you look at 12-5 in the last 17 games. That's epically good. So at some point, even the critics like me or whatever fans, you got to just give Stoops and especially Stephen Johnson the nod.
And how much of this is Florida-based when you think about it, based off that specific loss?
Well, and that's the one game where they lost that they deserve to win. There may be some wins they deserve to lose. I guess in the end, it all evens out. I just think Mississippi State is going to be such a litmus test to kind of start the second half, because we've seen them be 5-1 before and just not be able to finish at all. There's a lot of Mark Stoops bragging about the mental toughness and lack of fragility of this team. I mean, what I've seen is a lot of missed field goals against them. Like, I'm not sure South Carolina missing 3 field goals shows Kentucky's mental toughness, but then again, Kentucky missed field goals against Florida, so maybe it all just evens out.
And I think the bye week came at a perfect time.
For health-wise.
Very, very banged up. Now we're going to take a look specifically at the offense. Cats averaging just under 350 yards, 28 points per game. Stephen Johnson has had a strong start to the season, over 1,200 passing yards, 9 touchdowns. Benny Snell second in the SEC in rushing yards per game with rushing yards total, 523. Also has 6 touchdowns on the season. So Lachlan, this offense, I think it's fair to say it's been fairly inconsistent from game to game. But what do you make of their play overall this season?
Well, they lack an identity, which is the trouble. Last year, they could just run it down people's throat, and you gave the number that Benny Snell's second in the SEC in rushing, but that's a little misleading. He has 126 carries. No one else in the conference even has 100. They're just giving him the ball a lot. His yards per carry is the lowest of the top 20 rushers in the SEC. So their run game is not good, 90th in the nation. What has been good, and what you can't praise enough, is Stephen Johnson. That guy has been an absolute baller and will not get enough credit because the numbers aren't phenomenal, but you just look under intangibles and whatever it takes type of things, and Stephen Johnson. So that's the bright side. That's the good news. It seems like maybe Ross and Richardson and some of these guys are starting to get more incorporated into the offense. It is still ridiculous how little they're using C.J. Conrad. 9 catches through 6 games for your biggest weapon is kind of a joke, but the offense is just good enough. That's the best summary.
I think the thing is the offensive line has really underperformed, and I think they've had a lot of injuries, and that's really hurt the run game overall. And Saheem King really stepped up in some of those games in the middle, but I think last year you had JoJo Kemp, Boom Williams, and Benny Snell, and like you said, with all those carries that Benny's getting, it's carrying the load and just piling it up on him. And I don't know how that's really working for them.
And I don't know if that's sustainable. Like, he had that 71-yard run against Missouri, and thank goodness for Kentucky he did, because otherwise his numbers would be really pedestrian.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But I want to ask Stephen Johnson, just overall, this is exceeding your expectations.
Oh, it really
right?
is, because I remember being in here and we talked about how many starts is Drew Barker going to get and everything else, and you don't want to see Drew Barker anywhere near the field because Steven Johnson is he's just playing so well, and you can't put your finger on what exactly he does. He just makes the play when you need a play made, whether it's with his legs, whether it's a good decision or whatever. He's kind of the same thing he was last year with so many fewer mistakes, and it's been such a key to Kentucky.
And the intermediate passing, I think, is really improved.
Yeah, because they haven't hit the deep ball. It's been almost all intermediate passing, which we never would have predicted would be his strength.
And he's been a lot more confident, too.
Yeah.
And I think he's finally embraced that role that this is my team. I think last year and kind of early on this season, there was still that talk about Drew Barker, still kind of people in his ear. And now it's, hey, this is your team.
Yeah.
Drew Barker's not coming in for you.
He is the MVP of the first half of the season, without question.
Definitely. Now we're going to take a look at the defensive side of the ball. The Cats allowing just under 386 yards, 21.3 points per game. Senior linebacker Courtney Love is the team leader with 43 tackles, while Mike Edwards tied for first in the SEC with 3 interceptions. Josh Allen tied for first in the SEC with 7 sacks. So not a lot of expectations for this defense going into the season. They have really struggled. It kind of seems like a bend not break situation for them.
Yeah, I would say the defense has overachieved versus the expectations we all had at the start of the year. They have really kept UK in some games sometimes when the offense was struggling. And you mentioned Love and Pascal and Allen, and there are some guys who are really making some good plays. Now, the one thing that you wonder about, the rush defense was so phenomenal through the first 5 games of the year. I think, top 5 in the nation. And then Missouri just ran right through them. And you wonder if that's a bad sign for maybe, because if teams are able to start running on Kentucky, that secondary, let's be honest, it has not been the strength that we thought it was going to be. But in general, the defense, I would say they've overachieved, and I would give them a B+.
What's not working with that secondary? Because this was the group that was supposed to be the most experienced. You look at them on paper, and probably the most talented group on the team.
Yeah, and it's a group Mark Stoops has bragged about, and we've got some future stars there. They're kind of just making bad decisions, it seems like at times. I feel like athletically they're talented, but for whatever scheme they're in, they're just making – they're losing one-on-one battles. Sometimes you can't – like some of the catches Missouri made, the defender was right there, and the Missouri player just made a play. Like sometimes you got to give credit to the other team, as much as I hate to do that in any situation. But sometimes Missouri guys just made a play. But some of the angles the safeties are taking are just bad angles, and that's coaching. No offense. You got to have these guys that are better prepared to figure out what's going on.
I think the bottom line is this: you haven't had Jordan Jones for your last 4 games, and you've survived.
Yeah.
I think going into that South Carolina game, I think it was with Jordan Jones out, people were nervous, and how's he going to – and you've had Eli Brown, you've had other guys step up. So what does that say about maybe the depth at that linebacker spot?
And that's something that Stoops and the UK folks have bragged about, like, hey, we're building a program that can withstand injuries. And I'm with you. Clayton, you lose your leading tackle, and you thought that was a real problem. You've seen what's happened to Louisville's defense without Jair Alexander. They've fallen apart. UK's lost their best guy, and they've kept on going. Now, as long as they can just get 11 players on the field at times, that would be a good tip for the second half going forward.
I thought it was interesting because before that injury, I thought he was the one guy on this whole team, minus maybe Steven Johnson, that is irreplaceable.
Right.
And he goes out and, you know.
He's been replaced. I mean, no, you're right.
But we'll definitely welcome him back if he does come back against Mississippi State next weekend. And finally, you just touched on it with the 10 guys on the field. The coaching staff overall definitely had some miscues, and specifically people point to that Florida game. What do you make of the coaches through the first half of the season?
Yeah, it's hard for me to completely buy in to the coaching staff because, again, the performances are so consistently mediocre. And I think there's a lot of teams, quite honestly, would be 5-1 playing the schedule that Kentucky's played, a Purdue, a Virginia, whatever, and those aren't great teams. So I'm going to withhold judgment on Mark Stoops and his coaching until the second half of the season. I will say, in a business where it's a scoreboard business, and it doesn't matter how you get there, it matters that you get there. You got to give these guys credit. And there have been times when they've faced adversity during games and they haven't kind of fallen apart. So I give the coaching staff credit for that. But some of Stoops is supposed to be a defensive guy. There's way too many big plays they've given up. There have been some clock management issues at times I wonder about. But look, 5-1 was what everyone hoped for. Now 6-0, was a dream. But 5-1, the record is what you want it to be. So I'll give the coaches some credit for it.
Because I don't know if a lot of people honestly thought you were going 5-1. And I think the thing that's frustrating is you viewed Florida before the season I think, as a game you probably weren't going to win. And then you get right up to it and you say, all right, I think we can win this game.
Right.
And then the way the game turns out, it's frustrating. But I think it's a good thing they beat Missouri, because I saw that they were up 40-34 going into that final drive. And if they decided not to go for it on that 4th and 2 right at the goal line, and if they were to score that touchdown, go up by 1 point, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened.
And by the way, you'd like to send your Christmas cards to the referee for spotting that ball, taking his own sweet time at the end of the game.
We'll take
Look,
it.
you've been hosed enough. UK, they're like, look, we deserve a break.